Serious, what is the creepiest or most unexplained thing that's happened to you that you still think about to this day? When I was in high school, my boyfriend at the time introduced me to a guy named Jimmy who went to the same school as us. After meeting and hanging out a few times, Jimmy said that he recognized me from first grade. I never knew this guy before my boyfriend introduced us, and I also didn't really like this guy, so I was very skeptical. The weird thing was, Jimmy knew things about my first grade class and me. He knew the state I did a report on in that class, Montana. He incorrectly stated that our teacher was named Mrs. Tabasco, her name was Mrs. Semisco. He remembered the snow day where only a handful of students showed up to school and we played Mancala and sang songs with our teacher all day. The craziest thing is, he's not in our class picture, and when I showed him that picture he said he was absent on picture day. I asked him to name some of our classmates, and he could identify a couple people. I was so weirded out and suspicious of him, knowing that I had never seen him or met him before in my life and would have recognized someone who was in my class with me. When I asked a few friends from elementary school if they had ever seen or heard of this guy Jimmy before, they said they had no clue who this guy was. I don't know what ever came of Jimmy. He broke a table at my parents' house and I told my boyfriend I didn't want to hang out with him anymore because he creeped me out. I don't remember ever seeing him after sophomore year of high school. But I do remember how unsettled I felt being around him. A few years ago, I was at my lowest point in life. Several people close to me had passed away unexpectedly, I was being bullied every day at my job, my life was falling apart. I was past being depressed, I just couldn't imagine waking up another day. So I'd planned my suicide, bought a one-way plane ticket, got sleeping pills, and wrote a series of suicide notes. On the day I was to fly out to fulfill my plan, there was a terrible accident on the freeway to the airport. It was shut down both ways. So I drove into a nearby pub to have a beer and wait out the traffic. The second I sat on the patio with my drink, a gentleman asked if he could sit with me. Whatever, I thought, sure. Who cares? He told me that whatever I was doing next was a terrible idea and I would regret it. I thought, who is this random fucker? But I listened. He said that he sensed I was in pain, but that I had an incredible life ahead of me, and that this was not the way my story was supposed to end. Again, I'd never met this guy in my life, and hadn't mentioned a word to him about my plan. He asked me to hand him my keys and my wallet, and he'd give them back to me after I talked and he listened. I poured my heart out to this random guy. Told him all my traumas and pains in life and why I was heading to the airport on a one-way ticket to kill myself in a cemetery across the country where my family was buried. He just listened. And then he pulled out a lighter, asked me to pull out my suicide letters and helped me burn them. He told me I was worth so much to the world and that after I finished my drink, I needed to head home and get some sleep. He told me I was going to be okay tomorrow, and I believed him. He then gave me my keys and wallet back. I left that afternoon and went home, hugged my family, got some sleep, and the next day, I started working on myself, finding a therapist, a new job. Years later, I'm in a fantastic place in life, so far from where I was that day. To this day, no one in my life knows how close I came to killing myself. But this random stranger just somehow understood me. And saved my life. I never saw him again, I don't even know his name. It's the most unexplained thing that has ever happened to me. And I think about that guy every day, so, thank you, kind stranger, for saving my life at random September day on a pub patio. When I was 13 I moved into my brother's bedroom, as it is an extension to the original house with an ensuite and is far larger than my old room. Originally it was a tiny box room with the entrance to the attic but was extended outwards. The attic entrance is always open, with a permanent set of metal ladders angled up into it. Within a few weeks of moving, and I'd wake up in the middle of the night to see a figure staring down me, with a white head like a skull and formless black body. It would slowly move down to the foot of my bed and stare me until I moved, at which point it would sink into the floor. Just sleep paralysis, right? And I'd begged to move into the room and had just got it set up so I wasn't going to leave. I didn't really talk about it to anyone. It gradually became less frequent over time. 8 years after this, my brother mentioned at a get-together that he used to have a sleep paralysis demon when he lived in that room, a half-joking, half-freaked-out way to other people when the topic of them came up. He described the exact same fucking thing. Neither of us mentioned it to anybody else at the time it was happening, so we have no explanation for us both experiencing the same thing. Was delivering newspapers on my paper route when a longtime customer pulled his car next to me and asked me to just give him his daily newspaper now because he was going on a long trip. I handed him his newspaper, then skipped his house as I continued my route. The next day I was collecting the weekly fees. You used to have to go collect the money back then, no internet payment yet, and I went to his house to collect my fee. His wife answers and promptly complains that I missed her house on my deliveries the day before. I explained to her that her husband pulled up next to me. I told her what he said and that I gave him the paper. She started crying, told me that he had died a couple weeks ago and it was obviously not possible that I spoke with her husband the day before. I know what I saw, and nearly 30 years later I still think about that situation. I have no way to logically explain what happened and it still gives me the creeps. I was about 7 or 8 and I was at a housewarming party at my aunt and uncle's new house. It wasn't extravagant, it was a lower to middle class mobile home in South Carolina. Wasn't really a big party, just the family, some barbecue out back, red Solo cups, all boxes in the garage and not even distributed to their proper rooms. The only things that were unpacked and where they should be was the furniture. So anyway, 2 of my cousins were there and one of them had a friend over and we were all playing together, some made up fantasy game where we were pretending to be princesses or something. All of the adults were out back drinking, and I emphasize, there were only 4 people inside the house, me, my 2 cousins, and the friend. The house was set up in such a way that the kitchen was the first room you walked into from the front door, then there was the living room, then past it was the hallway with the bathroom and bedrooms. I was in the living room on the couch because that was the princess's bedroom and I was kinda just sitting there idle while the others got snacks. With no warnings or no other sounds, every single one of us hears a female voice let out an ear-piercing, gut-wrenching, overall horrifying scream in the bathroom. It was clear as day and it was so loud and sudden that it made me jump, as the living room was right next to the hallway. My cousins and their friend run out from the kitchen and look at me sitting there, and then we all run from the living room into the bathroom. Not a single person is in there, and nothing is displaced because there wasn't anything unpacked anyway except the toilet paper. We turned back around to see about 3 adults coming in from the back door because they had heard it too, coming from inside, so it wasn't any of them. What gets me about it is this: we have all since entertained the idea that it was a prank no one has fessed up to yet, but in order for it to have been a corporeal being, they would have had to somehow get into the bathroom without me seeing them from the couch, screamed, ran out of the bathroom to either the back door, without any of the 4 kids in the living room seeing, or out a window in one of the bedrooms. All of the bedroom windows were locked from the inside, so if they escaped that way, someone would have had to lock it and go out the back door, which again, we would have seen. One of the creepiest things that's happened to me. And before you cry, speaker hidden somewhere, that was one of the first things that my uncle checked for when he ran inside. He was told by us that none of us had done it. Me and my cousins think it's either something supernatural or something that the adults did, and all of the adults that were there think that one of us screamed and lied about it because we were all in the bathroom when they came in. Either way, the mood at the party was killed really fast after that. Everyone was confused and a little on edge, and there wasn't any of that self-satisfied undertone that someone who just played a really good practical joke would have been showing. It was a pretty blood-curdling sound. My last year at uni, I lived in a 4-bedroom house, with a ground floor, then 2 floors with 2 bedrooms each. My friends had the first floor bedrooms, I was on the 2nd floor, and the bedroom next to me was empty because the guy who had rented it was staying with his girlfriend. I don't think he ever slept there. My bedroom and his had small crawlspace cupboards in the corners. I come home from uni one day to find my friends discussing noises sounding like footsteps that they've heard from my floor at night, when I was asleep. I laugh, because apparently these noises are loud and I have heard nothing. Because I don't believe them, I offer to go look at the crawl spaces. We go upstairs, I open the door of the empty room, and right as I open the door to the crawl space in the other corner of the room slams shut. We freak out. There's no reason for that door to have been open in the first place. So we grab kitchen knives, hole up in one of their rooms, and wait for a friend to come and check the cupboards and attic. We never found out what those noises were, but it was the scariest thing that happened the whole year we were there. A ghost saved my life in a haunted old Shakespearean theater by telling me that a plank that edged along a wall, which was the only way to get to the furthest corner of the building, 60 feet above the stage, was missing a section. And warned me that I would die. 1985. I had worked there all summer when I was 17, and had never seen this guy before. I had landed a cool job as a stage operations crew the summer after high school and worked the upper theater high above the stage, on the catwalks. I was working in the far corner of a theater's rafters through my lunch break so I could leave early that day, and was asked to walk off the catwalk, cross a wooden plank, and drop a rope down, and pull up a larger rope to tie off on the rafters. We were getting ready for the season, and slowly stringing lights and scenery to the drops that were bars on pulleys and counterweights. As I left the decently made catwalk, I stepped onto a plank and couldn't see in the middle of the building, but could see a plank rising upward on the other side of the darkness. Okay, it must hit a platform there at the bottom and go up again, I thought. I walked 4 to 5 steps down into a very dimly lit part of the rafters on the plank when a man stopped me. Turn around slowly. The plank is missing. No light. Get light. "Five me," I said in a sarcastic teenage voice. I turned around and got back on the catwalk, walked to the ladder and climbed down to the stage to get a flashlight. My boss asked, "Why are you down here?" "I need a light, and your guy said a plank was missing and to get a light." "What guy? You were the only one up there." "The old guy with the beard and wool cap." My boss, who headed the technical/carpenter/electrical part of the theater, was in his late 60s and had worked in that theater for nearly 40 years. He looked amused at first, laughing at me, asking, "How do you know about that?" "Know about what?" "I came down for a flashlight so I could see." "You're serious? You saw him?" "It must have been 1954, and a rigger fell from the rafters and died. He fell all the way to the stage. I think his name was John. In the 74 my assistant made up a story about talking to him, but back then we were all smoking something." "What are you on?" "Nothing. Come with me, let's see if it's missing." So he did. Sure enough, the plank was missing. There was the plank I was on. A platform, nothing, and a platform with a plank from that platform to the upper corner of the building. From my vantage point, it looked like plank, platform, plank, platform, plank. In the dust along the plank were my footprints leading right to the edge. One more step and I would have fallen to the stage. Below us was a thick fabric curtain that separated the stage from the rafters, blocking light from below. In the horizontal folds of the curtain, a wool cap. To this day I've not stepped back into that theater. I used to live in a house that was built on old farm land, I slept in a bedroom that had no door. Except for the door leading up to the attic, which had a little sliding lock on it. Every single night, I'd close the door and lock it. The attic frequently had birds and such get into it, and I didn't feel like having them fly out. Except, every single morning, it'd be unlocked and slightly ajar. During the night, I'd wake up and have sleep paralysis. It was pretty frequent, and I got used to it. During said sleep paralysis, a figure would open up the closet and slip out. All black, sort of shadowy and wearing what I can only describe as a farmer's hat. It'd stare at me for a moment, just stare. Sometimes it'd take a step over before turning and walking out the entrance to my bedroom, which lacked a door, but I had set up some beads. They'd knock together. I can still hear it to this day. I had always been told I had an overactive imagination. I never spoke of it to my parents or family since they'd probably make fun of it. One summer, my cousin came to visit. She took over my room, since my family thought she deserved a larger room for whatever reason. She came down for breakfast in the morning white as a sheet and said I could have my room back. When my mother asked why, she told her she had sleep paralysis and saw basically what I had. I had never spoken to her of this. Years later, once we had moved out of the house, my mother told me something. Her bedroom was on the same hallway as mine, and she always slept with the door open. She told me some nights she'd wake up, just to see a figure pass by the bedroom quickly. She stopped getting up to check it after the first few times, but the house always gave her the creeps. I don't really know if it was a shared delusion or what, but it still scares me a bit to this day. I went to UVA at the same time that Morgan Harrington disappeared, which was my second year there, aka sophomore year. Sadly to say, because she wasn't a student, she was in town for a Metallica concert. Her death was salacious but didn't really strike fear into the student body like it did when Hannah Graham would go missing 5 years later, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Anyway, about a week or so after Morgan's death in 2009, me and my friend were at a grocery store right outside of campus getting snacks around 10 p.m. Bus service had ended, so we decided to use a cab service UVA had set up to make sure students had access to rides in case they were drunk or just needed transpo. UVA pays the bill upfront and charges you later. So we get into this guy's cab and he immediately starts bringing up Morgan's disappearance. This wasn't so strange because everyone was talking about it. It was national news. But I'm an introvert with a good memory, so I remember just about every conversation over 3 minutes long I've ever had, especially with strangers. He starts talking about police theories about the case, and my friend who went on to get a master's in gothic horror starts talking about how some people thought a cult was involved. Basic speculative BS. In addition to that, I remember the guy looking at me through the rearview mirror. I won't say I never forget a face, but this conversation was so macabre that has stuck with me, even years later. Anyway, he dropped us off and we made it home safe. Fast forward 5 years, I'm in grad school 1,000 miles away and Hannah Graham's disappearance is national news. Fortunately in this case, they have video surveillance. You can see her walking away with a big, African-American guy with dreadlocks. They get an ID and his face is on the news everywhere. I don't recognize him. They eventually catch this guy in TX, just an hour or so away from where I was in school at the time. As days go by, they're profiling this guy, and his DNA matches samples found on Morgan's remains, found 3 months after her disappearance in 2009. A picture comes up on the screen of what he looked like 5 years before and my heart stops. There are no dreadlocks. His hair is clean cut, he's about 40 pounds lighter, and his beard is short. He is, I'm 97% certain, the same man who drove us home that night. He lured both Morgan and Hannah with his cab. Every now and then, I think of what would have happened if I hadn't been with my male friend that night. I'm pretty sure it was his idea to go out so late, but still, or what if he had been a girl? Would I have made it home okay? Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more.